Hey, what's going on, everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics, and I got a request for drawing basic shapes. This is more of a beginner's guide. Some people have a hard time filling out shapes like the complexities of the arm, the nose, the face in general, the legs, everything, and breaking those down into basic shapes. So, one of the things I want to talk to you about today, this isn't going to be software specific. I'm using Sketchbook Pro, but that's not the basis of this, so I'm not going to show any of the icons. I'm just going to show the artwork. One of the things I want to touch on, and everybody should be trying this at least once in a while, is doing the test where you draw like, I've put in my horizontal plane. There's my pretty ugly sphere. Obviously you can just grab the sphere tool, but I like to challenge myself every now and then and just try to draw one. I usually have to sketch it and erase lines away to get it, but I can get a pretty decent one after a few revisions. But not the point of the story here, so let me not digress. Um, so what I'm trying to explain by showing you this is a very basic, rudimentary thing that you should do, but it's the idea of what you should apply to everything that you draw. So I've got the sphere in there, I erase my horizon line, and that's one transition from a 2D object looking closer to 3D. The next transition would be designating a shadow, light source, and that. We'll say something like that. I always draw a little LS. You'll see that in a lot of my drawings. And then the way the light reacts on the object, we'll say something like this. So all of this would be a little bit more into shadow. And then you've got to, after you progress from areas like this, you can start to go, okay, does the object have specularity to it? Is it texturized? All that comes into play after you designate some of this very basic stuff to make the object look 3D. And one of the things is that you basically are trying to convince the viewer that the 2D object they're looking at is three-dimensional. So it's an illusion. And the more you start to acknowledge that and realize that, the easier it gets sometimes to try to come up with stuff, realizing that not everything's going to work out extremely perfect in the design, and that's okay too. So you can move past that. If you're constantly in fear that something's not right, so you're afraid to ever release your work, that can be a downer too. So you don't want to do that. You want to be comfortable with your artwork and yourself, and have that confidence to bring stuff out because you know you could sit around trying to perfect it forever, but if you don't release anything to the public, then you're not going to get very far anyways. So all these beautiful, wonderful drawings aren't doing any good if they're in, grandma's basement or whatever. So, that's pretty ugly oval or circle there. So sorry about that. But again, I'm trying to convey the message of trying to make something look relatively 3D. So that's the first thing I would say. Practice that, and you can use the tools with the software. You don't have to draw like I did. The other thing to make this convert, you've got your horizon line back here, right? So you probably have some kind of light source uh, that goes, like this, even in the background. You get your hot spot of your light source up here. So you're going to have this large transitional fade back there. And then, being that this is a horizon, you're going to have small little details that as they get closer to the viewer, they space out and then become larger and more discernible when they're closer to the viewer. So for instance, we'll say this ball is resting on a body of water, even though it's probably wouldn't happen, but oh well. So you would draw these little, lake effects or ripples in the pond or whatever, and as they get closer to the viewer, they're going to space out and they're going to become larger, and then now you're going to be able to see the details in each ripple as it makes a certain transition to the closeness of the viewer or the camera, however you look at it. So again, that's creating depth by knowing that. I mean, obviously, these are just little scribbles. I didn't even put them in there that well, but you could see the idea start to take shape by using that technique. So okay, so that's a real basic approach right there. Another thing that I want to touch on is when you are drawing complex stuff, I want you to try to think of it like you're a 3D animator, that you're our modeler. You're modeling something in 3D, and I'll show you why that helps, or at least I think it does. I'm going to just draw like a finger pointing kind of off the distance. But I'll draw, a little fat finger. Alright, so it's got three parts. You got the knuckles on the top. You got a little bit of a nail right there. Okay, and I'm not going to draw the whole hand. The purpose of this is to show you how to break down objects. Like say you're looking at a photo and you're studying it, but you can't, something about it you can't get right. You can't get the shading right, the lighting, even the line art isn't gelling with you for whatever reason. One thing I want you to try to do, and try to do this with a variety of objects, is draw it in, but immediately go to making it look like it's a three-dimensional diagram. And all you do is you draw these little circles that go with the shape of it there. You've got your starting point here. You think of it like Spider-Man's web almost. But if you've ever seen a 3D, it's called a 3D wireframe, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I challenge you to mess around with 3D just a little bit because it does open up your mind to the way that things are really shaped and react into a dimensional reality. And your study of lighting is so much nicer when you understand 3D. Um, so by doing this, what it starts to do for me, anyways, and hopefully it's doing it for you, is it allows you to start looking at the form, especially when you go back into the lighting. If I would have shaded this before this, I might have said shaded like something like maybe that, right? Um, but now that I have that wireframe there, it's making me see this shape as it's hard to explain. Let me see if I can change the color of the pen to show you here. Okay, it's making me see the shape now as this point being closest to the camera, all the way down. Here, 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 something like that. Okay, so now that I see that, and say I had my light source, I don't know, up here, I would now perceive that the shadow would be all the way up to here. Where before I don't think I would have saw that, just quickly sketching it in. Um, Not to mention, I tend to do less shading. I don't like to overly shade my stuff. Uh, so that's kind of a weakness of mine. I need to start spotting in more blacks and getting a nicer, richer, uh, deeper feel to my artwork because nothing worse than some really great artwork, but it has tons and tons of white spots. Um, so it looks unfinished. It doesn't look as dimensional as it could. I might leave a little bit on the base of this finger as a white, like a secondary light, and then I would probably start when I came in and did my shading. I would probably shade up and around the knuckles. I would try to show the fattiness of the finger right in there. So that's how I would come to um, a more dimensional perception of that little sketch. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't nothing special. This isn't, I'm trying to keep it not advanced at this point. But by doing that, you're going to start to be able to break down other shapes. And you can check out another video where I have one on breaking down more complex shapes with smaller individual shapes. So that's another approach you want to use. But this approach, you want to just, you know, let's try it on something else, I guess. One that a lot of people have trouble with is the eye, right? And it is pretty complex. I would safely say it's probably second. It's the coolest thing to draw. It's secondly the most complex area of the body besides hands. Um, I think hands are just the toughest because there's so much going on there. But the eye's got a lot going on too. You have, the depth of the eyelid like this. You've got the depth, or you got the eyelid the way it goes back and recesses under the flap of skin in the brow like this. Then you have this thickness of the eye, depending on which way you're looking, up at it or around at it. There's this very thick part of the eyelid that almost nobody draws unless they're doing realism. Then it's in there every time because it's realistically it's there. But it seems like in comic drawing they avoid it altogether. You got it on the bottom too. In this angle, you would see both. You'd see it on the top and bottom. It would look like it disappears probably on the sides. But I'm not looking at reference. This could be way off. But the thing that most people mess up is they'll go to draw the eye and they do this, and then they shade it in, and that's an eye to them, and it looks very flat, very boring. What I do now is I draw the outer perimeter of the eye. Which I need to figure out the name of that because I keep talking about eyes, and I don't know what this part's called. Um, but at any rate, I'll draw that first. I'll fill in the second, the iris or whatever, pupil, like that. And then to round that form out, every time I shade it, I try to think in terms of it being very rounded. I mean, if you were looking at this eye from the side, it would have an extremely rounded curve to it. So you have to notice that and do that. Take notice of that and put that in every aspect of the sketch afterwards. If not, it's going to come out very flat. It's going to look like a record player or something, and it's not going to look like a real eye. So as I keep shading, I try to remember again, if I was to draw the diagram over it, that it would look. Let's go back to black here. Oops. It would look like this. You'd have the downward part of the brow, the eyelid, the rounded part. This comes back out, down and back around, and I challenge you to sketch that out and do one of these, hang it on your wall, whatever, because you it kind of just beats that into your mind that hey, this is a very rounded object. This is not flat by any means, um, anything but. But when you see people draw it and they struggle with it, the first thing they do is draw it very flat. So I think this little technique helps you get a feel for that, and remember that while you're drawing your stuff. I think honestly, I think it needs to even be more rounded, like lines like this. I probably should start with the eye like that, very rounded, very dimensional, and then let the rest. This would come up, then over. And I got a little bit of a knowledge for this because I did do some 3D animation for some time there, so I would build things like this in 3D, and it did. It helped me look at my artwork and go, God, I'm drawing really flat, really boring stuff. Um, So that's part of you as an artist to self-critique yourself and find areas where you could make it better. That's what we're all striving for, and that's also why it's nice when you do have somebody that's a little bit more knowledgeable go over your work and critique it. You got to develop that tough skin, and not take it personal, because you'll never get better if you don't. But that's a big part of growing as an artist is finding the flaws in your work and trying to eliminate them. If you think that your work's just perfect and everybody should just clap and applaud every time you release something on DeviantArt, then you're probably not going to get that far. You're probably going to just cease to grow as an artist. So you really want to find these flaws and bring them out. So that's how I would do that dimensional diagram over that. So we've got the sphere with the horizontal. I would practice that. Obviously, don't just do a sphere. Do your horizontal line, then do a square in perspective, your vanishing point. Do one of these like that. Going to the vanishing point. And keep challenging yourself. Build upon that. You start doing a couple squares. Pretty soon you've got something that starts to look like a building. We put a pyramid or pyramid on top like that. Again, taking note of the vanishing point. And throw some windows in there. Put some wings on it. You got a spaceship, whatever. I mean, that's not a spaceship, but that's how things come together. It starts very basic like that. Then you get into more complex shapes like the eyes and the hands, and you start learning rhythms about them too. So I would just suggest that you take notice of all that. Try these methods. Start with some very basic stuff. Watch your lighting, and then keep adding to these shapes as you go, and you'll realize real quick that just this effect alone can be applied to 50% of your work. This effect will help you get a better idea of rounding out forms in a 2D space. Like the same thing. Now that I'm looking at this eye, I can come over to the side here and even quickly, more quickly than I normally would. Excuse me. I can sketch out, another perspective of the eye, and I'm using this as my reference. I mean, I'm not drawing lines like this. You can to actually scale them, but I'm not doing that. I'm just looking over at this, and I'm going, all right, yeah, if that eye was there, then it'd fall about here, and blase splee, and I just kind of keep going. I don't, slow down and as much as I normally would if I was just sketching this as my first sketch. So sometimes little reference shots like this can help you. Um, I actually use a lot of my artwork as influences like clip art. I basically use my artwork as clip art to other pieces that I do, and that becomes really easy in digital. It's sometimes why I think people think that digital and traditional are so different of a thing. But I've actually seen guys, I got the idea from guys that use traditional methods, but they just lightbox everything. So they would like reuse some of their own artwork, lightbox over it, make a new piece, and bam, you help to, you know, get better at your deadlines. It's kind of a funky looking eye, but what I'm trying to show is the depth of it. That it's very rounded. All these forms are extremely rounded. See, like this cheek right here, I could just put one line right there, and that shows you there's a cheek there. Or I could go, you know what? The light source is here. Sorry, I keep doing the light source on the same side. Force habit. And then it hits here, and it rounds down. So I got this bright area of light here. I've got this shading. However I want to define that with line art, you can do any number of ways to show that that's shaded, like that. And it helps round out that cheekbone. You know, it's a lot better than just this one line that was there. And I could take that a step further. I would if I was digitally painting this, and I would say, there's another soft shadow that's on this side of the highlight. So now this thing really starts to pop out, and then then you bring color in there, and it really jumps. So just little things like that. And this is called I call it a layering method. You don't want to do it all over the place and too much, but you just basically go light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, and that's how you have contrast to your images. Anyways, if you look around you, a lot of times, if everything was in dark, you can have various levels of darkness, but there's going to be some transition that makes the forms pop out. So, all right, I don't want to get too long and lengthy on this. You guys are probably sick of hearing me talk. So that was my little tidbit for today. And, let me know what you think. Drop some comments below. Keep drawing, keep having fun, and check out Blackstone Eternal on Indie Planet if you'd like to support. That's my comic book, my publication. So always happy to get more readers when I can. So take care of yourself, and talk to you soon.